The autumn wind carried dust across the Whitlock ranch like scattered prayers nobody bothered to answer anymore. Boen Whitlock stood at his kitchen window, watching the sun sink behind hills that stretched empty to the horizon. 6 years he had lived alone in this house. 6 years since he stopped believing in second chances. The letters came every month, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time, all from women looking for husbands, all promising to be good wives, to cook and clean and bear children, all thrown into the fire without being opened. Boen had learned that hope was a dangerous thing. It could kill a man just as sure as a bullet, only slower and with more pain. Today brought another letter. The postman left it on the porch like he always did, never staying to chat. Nobody stayed long at the Whitlock place anymore. The house felt heavy with old sorrow, and folks in town said it was haunted by the ghost of Martha Whitlock, who died bringing Boen's son into the world. They said you could still hear her crying in the upstairs bedroom on quiet nights. Boen picked up the letter and started toward the fireplace. Same as always, but something made him stop. The handwriting was different. Not fancy like the others. This looked like someone had written it with a shaking hand, pressing too hard, like the words fought to get out. He set the letter on the mantel and walked away. But it stayed there unopened for 3 days, waiting. The train whistle echoed across the valley on Thursday morning. Boen was mending fence when he heard it, but he did not look up. Trains brought mail and supplies and sometimes traveling preachers. They did not bring anything he wanted, but when he rode back to the house that evening, 2 figures sat on his porch steps. A woman in a faded blue dress and a little girl who could not have been more than 6 years old. The woman had her head down, a worn bonnet hiding her face. The child was drawing pictures in the dirt with a stick. Boen stopped his horse 20 feet away. He had not expected visitors, had not wanted them. The woman looked up when she heard his boots hit the ground, and he caught a glimpse of her face before she turned away quick. Half of it was smooth and pretty. The other half was scarred by fire, the skin pulled tight and shiny. "Mr. Whitlock?" Her voice was soft, uncertain. "I am Clara Halloway. This is my daughter Sadie. We got your letter." "I did not send any letter." Clara reached into her bag and pulled out a piece of paper. Her hands shook as she held it out to him. "Someone did. Said you needed a wife. Said to come to the Whitlock ranch outside Millfield." Boen took the letter and read it by the fading light. It was written on his own paper, with his name signed at the bottom, but he had never seen it before in his life. "I did not write this," he said. The little girl looked up from her drawing. "Are you the man who lives with the sad ghost?" "Sadie, hush," Clara whispered, but the child kept staring at Boen with curious brown eyes. "Mama cries at night too," Sadie said. "Maybe your ghost is lonely like Mama." Clara stood up quick, gathering their bags. "I am sorry, Mr. Whitlock. There has been a mistake. We will go back to town." "Town is 6 miles, Boen said. Sun is almost down. Wolves come out after dark." Clara stopped moving. She had 1 bag in each hand and Sadie pressed close to her skirts. "We cannot impose on you. You can sleep in the barn tonight. Leave in the morning if you want." It was not kindness that made him offer. It was the memory of another woman who had traveled far to marry a stranger. Martha had come on the train from Ohio, scared and hopeful and carrying nothing but a carpet bag and a silver locket. She had died in the bedroom upstairs, calling his name. Boen showed them to the barn and gave them clean blankets. The little girl chattered while her mother spread the bedding, asking about his horses and his cattle and whether he had any cats. Clara said almost nothing, keeping her scarred side turned away from him. When he brought them bread and milk for supper, he found a photograph on the ground near their bags. It was burned around the edges, the faces barely visible, a man and woman standing in front of a church. The woman's face was whole in the picture, pretty and smiling. The man wore a preacher's collar. Clara saw him looking and snatched the photograph away. "That is nobody," she said quick. "Just an old picture." But Boen had seen the fear in her eyes when she grabbed it. The same fear Martha used to get when thunder rolled across the sky. The fear of someone who had learned that the people who promised to protect you could be the ones who hurt you most. That night, Boen lay in his bed and listened to the wind move through the empty rooms. He had gotten used to the silence, used to eating alone and talking to no one but his horses, used to the way sadness settled into a house like dust. covering everything until you forgot what things looked like underneath. But tonight the silence felt different, heavier, like it was hiding something. He got up and walked to the window that faced the barn. A soft light glowed in the window where Clara and Sadie were sleeping. The little girl's voice drifted on the night air, asking her mother to tell her a story. Clara's voice answered low and gentle, spinning a tale about a princess who lived in a tower made of moonlight. Boen had not heard a bedtime story in 6 years. Not since Martha died and took their unborn son with her. He pressed his forehead to the cold glass and tried not to remember the nursery upstairs, with its empty cradle and toys that no child would ever play with. Morning came gray and cold. Boen found Clara at the well washing Sadie's face and hands. The little girl was already dressed and ready to go, her small bag packed neat and tidy. "Thank you for letting us stay," Clara said without looking at him. "We will be on our way now." "Where will you go?" Clara's hand stilled on the washcloth. "I do not know yet, somewhere. What about him?" Boen nodded toward the burned photograph that stuck out of Clara's bag. Clara's shoulders went tight. "He is dead to me, but not dead." Clara finally looked at him then, and he saw the truth in her eyes. Fear and shame and something harder underneath. Determination, maybe, or just the will to keep breathing when everything else wanted to quit. "No," she said quiet. "Not dead." Sadie tugged on Bowen's coat. "Mister, do you have any little boys here?" "No. I saw a little boot by the barn. Just one boot. Where's the boy who lost it?" Bowen's chest went tight. He looked toward the spot behind the barn where he had buried the tiny boots Martha had bought for their son. Boots that would never be worn by feet that would never touch the ground. "There is no boy," he said. But Sadie was already running toward the barn, following some path only children could see. She disappeared around the corner and Clara started after her. "Sadie, come back. We need to go." They found the little girl kneeling by a small wooden cross that Boen had carved years ago. She was holding the tiny boot, turning it over in her hands like it was made of gold. "Someone is sleeping here," Sadie said. "Someone little like me." Clara knelt beside her daughter and took the boot gentle. She looked up at Boen, and for the first time she did not try to hide her scarred face. "Your son?" Boen could not speak, could not move. The word son hit him like a fist to the chest, knocking all the air out of his lungs. Clara set the boot back where Sadie had found it. Then she stood and took her daughter's hand. "We should go," she said soft. But Sadie pulled away from her mother and walked straight to Boen. She was so small her head barely reached his belt, but she looked up at him with those serious brown eyes and said something that broke him wide open. "I am sorry. Your little boy went to heaven before you could teach him about horses." Boen dropped to his knees in the dirt. 6 years of grief came pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. 6 years of blaming himself for Martha's death. 6 years of wondering what his son would have looked like, what his first word would have been, whether he would have liked to ride or preferred to walk. Clara was beside him then, her hand on his shoulder. She did not say anything, just sat with him while he cried for the family he had lost and the father he had never gotten to be. When the tears finally stopped, Sadie was still there, patting his arm like she was comforting a hurt animal. "It is okay to be sad," she said. "Mama taught me that. But you do not have to be sad alone." Boen looked at Clara, really looked at her, past the scars and the fear and the burned photograph. He saw a woman who had survived something terrible and was still trying to build a life for her daughter. He saw strength disguised as gentleness and courage wrapped in quiet determination. "The letter," he said. "Who really sent it?" Clara hesitated. Then she pulled out another piece of paper from her bag. This one was written in different handwriting, harsh and angry. "Reverend Pike," she said, "from my old town. He has been trying to get rid of me since my husband died. He says I am a bad influence on the congregation. He says my scars are a mark of sin. What really happened to your husband?" Clara's hand went to her scarred cheek without thinking. "He set our house on fire, with me inside. Said if he could not have a perfect wife, he would not have a wife at all. I got out, but barely. He did not." Boen felt something cold and hard settle in his stomach. "And Pike?" "He said it was God's judgment on me for being a willful wife. Said I brought it on myself. When I would not leave town, he started writing letters, telling people I was available for marriage, sending me to places where no one knew my story. So he could get rid of you. so he could prove that no decent man would want damaged goods. The words hung in the air like smoke. Boen reached out slow and careful, giving Clara time to pull away if she wanted. When she did not move, he touched the scarred side of her face with his fingertips. "You are not damaged," he said. "You are survived." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she did not look away. For the first time since she arrived, she let him see all of her face. The beautiful side and the scarred side, the part that had been hurt and the part that had healed. "Papa," Sadie said sudden, tugging on Bowen's sleeve, "are you going to marry Mama?" The word Papa hit Bowen almost as hard as the tears had. This little girl who barely knew him was already offering him a place in her small family, already willing to trust him with the most important thing in her world. Before he could answer, they heard horses coming up the road. 3 riders moving fast and raising dust. The man in front wore a black coat and white collar. His face was smooth and handsome in a way that made Bowen think of snakes. "Clara Halloway," the man called out when he reached the yard. "I have come to take you home." Clara stepped behind Bowen without thinking, pulling Sadie with her. "Reverend Pike, how did you find us?" "I sent you here, did I not?" Pike climbed down from his horse, moving like a man who owned everything he looked at. "Did you think I would not follow to make sure you arrived safely?" "You lied to me. You said Mr. Whitlock wanted a wife." Pike smiled, cold and satisfied. "I said no such thing. I merely arranged for 2 lonely people to meet. What happens next is between you and God." Bowen stepped forward. He was bigger than Pike, broader in the shoulders and harder in the eyes. "She does not want to go with you." "What she wants is of no concern," Pike said. "She is under my spiritual guidance. Her late husband left her in my care before he died. Her husband tried to kill her." Pike's smile never wavered. Thomas Halloway was a good man driven to desperate acts by a wife who would not submit. Clara must learn from her mistakes if she hopes to find redemption. Sadie pressed closer to her mother's skirts. The child could feel the danger in Pike's voice even if she did not understand the words. Bowen had heard enough. He moved so he was standing directly between Pike and Clara. "Get off my land." "I think not. I have come too far to leave empty-handed. Clara, gather your things. We are going home. This is home," Clara said, quiet but clear. "I am staying here." Pike's mask slipped then, showing the anger underneath. "You forget yourself, woman. You have no choice in this matter. No man will want you looking as you do. You are fit only for charity and penance." That was when Bowen hit him. It was not a planned thing, not a calculated move. One moment Pike was talking, and the next he was flat on his back in the dirt, blood running from his nose. "The lady said no," Bowen said, standing over him. "That is all the choice she needs." Pike scrambled to his feet, his 2 companions reaching for their guns. But Bowen was already moving, his own weapon clear of its holster before theirs were halfway drawn. "I suggest you ride away," Bowen said, calm and steady, "before I forget my manners entirely." Pike wiped blood from his face and straightened his coat. "This is not over, Whitlock. That woman is a marked sinner. She will bring nothing but trouble to your door. Then I guess we will face it together." Pike mounted his horse, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. "You will regret this. Both of you." They rode away in a cloud of dust and curses. Bowen watched until they disappeared over the hill, then turned back to Clara and Sadie. Clara was staring at him like she had never seen him before. "Why did you do that?" "Because no one should have to run from their past forever. You do not even know me. I know enough." Bowen holstered his gun and looked down at Sadie, who was watching him with something like awe. "I know you are brave enough to start over with nothing. I know you love your daughter more than your own safety. And I know Pike is wrong about damaged goods." Clara touched her scars again, that unconscious gesture that spoke of years of shame. "People stare. They whisper. They think God marked me for my sins. People think a lot of foolish things." Bowen held out his hand to her. "What matters is what you think." Clara looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then she reached out and took it. "I think," she said, slow and careful, "that maybe some marks are not punishments. Maybe some of them are proof that we survived something we were not supposed to survive." Sadie clapped her hands like they had just performed a magic trick. "Does this mean we get to stay, Mama? Does this mean I can learn about horses?" Bowen looked down at the little girl who had already started calling him Papa. Then he looked at Clara, who had stopped trying to hide her face. The scars were still there, would always be there. But they did not make her ugly. They made her real. "There is something I need to show you," he said. He led them into the house, up the narrow stairs to the room he had not opened in 6 years. The nursery still looked exactly as Martha had left it. Cradle in the corner, toys on the shelves, and in the closet, wrapped in tissue paper, a tiny white dress that would never be worn. "Martha made this for our son," Boen said, lifting the dress careful. "She sewed every stitch by hand. Said she wanted him to have something beautiful for his christening." Clara touched the delicate fabric with reverent fingers. "It is lovely." She would want it to be used. Would want some child to wear it and be happy. Clara understood. She looked at Sadie, who was examining the toys with wide eyes. It might be too big for her now. She will grow into it. They stood there in the golden afternoon light, surrounded by the dreams of people who were gone and the hopes of people who remained. The nursery did not feel sad anymore. It felt expectant, like it had been waiting all this time for the right family to bring it back to life. That evening, they sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the prairie. Sadie had fallen asleep in Clara's lap, tired from a day of exploring and asking questions about everything she saw. Clara stroked her daughter's hair and hummed soft under her breath. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure out what comes next," Boen said. "Together." Clara shifted so she was facing him full, not hiding her scars in shadow. "I cannot promise to be a perfect wife. I do not know how to be what you might need. I do not need perfect," Boen said. "I need real. I need someone who understands that some wounds never fully heal, but they do not have to define us. And if Pike comes back, then we will face him. All of us." Clara smiled then, slow and genuine. It transformed her whole face, made the scars seem like just another part of her story instead of the whole story itself. "Sadie likes you," she said. "She has never called anyone Papa before. I like her too. She reminds me that there is still good in the world, that some things are worth protecting." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. Somewhere closer, the wind moved through the grass like a whispered promise. The house behind them no longer felt empty. It felt full of possibility, full of the kind of love that came not from perfection, but from choosing to see beauty in broken things and strength in scarred places. When they finally went inside, Boen helped Clara tuck Sadie into the small bed he had made up in the spare room. The little girl was almost asleep, but she opened her eyes when Boen bent to say goodnight. "Will you tell me about the horses tomorrow, Papa?" "I will tell you about the horses," Boen promised. "And will you help Mama not be sad anymore?" Boen looked across the room at Clara, who was pretending not to listen. "I think your Mama is going to help me not be sad anymore." Sadie smiled and closed her eyes. "Good. Everybody should have somebody." Later, when the child was truly asleep, Boen and Clara sat by the kitchen fire and talked. Really talked. About Martha and Thomas and the children they had lost and the fears they carried. About starting over and taking chances and learning to trust again. "I used to think love was supposed to be easy," Clara said. "Thomas was handsome and charming and said all the right things. I thought that was what mattered. What do you think now?" "Now I think love is supposed to be safe. Not easy, but safe. A place where you can be yourself, scars and all." Boen reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were work rough and strong. Real hands that had held a child and survived fire and built a new life from nothing. "I think you are right," he said. Outside, the wind picked up and rattled the windows. But inside the house, everything was warm and still and right. The ghost that people said haunted the Whitlock ranch had finally found peace. The sadness that had lived in those rooms for 6 years had lifted like morning fog, replaced by something stronger and more lasting. Hope. The dangerous, beautiful, necessary thing that Boen had thought was gone forever. When Clara finally went upstairs to sleep in the room next to Sadie's, Boen walked through his house and saw it with new eyes. Not empty anymore, not waiting anymore, full of the sound of breathing that was not his own, full of the promise of mornings that would bring conversation and laughter, and the simple pleasure of not being alone. He stopped at the window and looked out at the barn where Clara and Sadie had spent their first night. Tomorrow he would move their things into the house. Tomorrow he would start teaching Sadie about horses and Clara about the land and himself about being part of a family. Again, tomorrow would be the first day of whatever came next, and when the wind came through that hallway again, it no longer smelled like grief.